Hello, my intrepid students. We're here with this YouTube video with a goal of coding our own boilerplates that will have a client and server monorepo structure that's going to run off of one command, and I'll take y'all through the process of going from an empty directory to building this whole thing. And the whole key aspect of this video and why I'm doing it, since I have other ones kind of similar to this, is that I want to use ESBuild as my preferred bundler. It's coded in Go and will run in your OS's native language, which means it is lightning fast. I love it so much more than any Webpack boiler I've ever built, and so much so that my full stack students and my co-instructor Andrew are already using the ESBuild template that I have made for them. And I gotta say, I'm a huge fan and I'm switching to it. And I noticed that some of the videos I was looking up still kind of cover some of its older API, or typically from the command line. So this one's going to specialize in using the JavaScript API in conjunction with the newest ESBuild installation to try and build a fun repo. This video is going to focus on getting all the root level stuff coded out and good to go. I'm going to focus on the client side configuration of a development process. In the next video, I'll add the server, its configuration, and some scripts to get everything running. And then I will also, in the same video or a third video, we'll see how long these take, talk about some of the production level things you need to take into consideration. So we're going to have all in all 4 build configurations: client dev, server dev, client prod, server prod. You can combine these all to in a file and export functions and things like that, but I'm going to keep these things separate, at least for this video's sake. Rather than making a companion repo for this, I'm going to have a link in the description down below for the template starter that I've already coded over the weekend and experimented and learned and prepped this little lesson for. Available in the link down below if you just want to go take a look at it and get at it. But other than that, let's dive on in and get going. I am going to be using Commander as my shell here. Just use whatever shell you prefer. If you want WSL, if you're on Mac, you already have your terminal accessible. Just whatever shell that you are comfortable with. I'll be using Git, I'll be using Node, and NPM. If you're not familiar with Node, I'm not going to be doing a whole lot of specific server-side coding with Node, so don't worry about it. We're going to be mostly using Node for its package manager, aka NPM. I also do have installed one of the later LTS versions of Node, so if you're just tuning in or you're on an older version of Node, make sure you upgrade to the latest LTS of Node, which at the time of this video I checked was 18.17. We're going to be leveraging MJS extensions due to ESBuild's documentation recommending we go ahead and do that anyway. You don't need to. You can switch back to require statements and promises with .then syntax, but this will allow us to write some very clean configurations using ESBuild because it allows us to leverage using MJS extensions, import syntax, as well as top-level await are the 2 main features of why I want this, the newest version of Node, to build this out with. So yeah, I'll have those installed. Use whatever code editor or IDE you prefer. I'll be using VS Code with a material theme extension if you're curious as to how I built mine out. So I'm in my helping students directory. Be this wherever you want to build your projects out. Let's go ahead and start building this sucker. I'm going to call it ESBuild Boiler YouTube series, ESBuild boiler series, whatever I want to call it. It's a folder name. Whatever boilerplate you intend to be coding for yourself, or if this is going to be for a project you're building, then just go ahead and call it whatever you want. It honestly doesn't matter. Let's go ahead and CD into that sucker. I'm going to go ahead and turn this into a Node project. Now again, I actually filled this out properly for the template repo that'll be in the description down below. You can fill this out if you intend to code and use your own. Otherwise, you can just follow along and answer whatever to all these questions, and we're going to get up and running here. So yeah. Now, the bulk of the configuration files aren't too terrible. There's really not a whole lot we got going on here, but while I'm on the command line, I'm going to go ahead and install the packages I'll need, and I'll give you like a brief breakdown of like what we need. So like if I'm focusing on the client side configurations and things like that for this project, I'll go ahead and have to install React and React DOM. This is just part of the tech stack that we teach here at Covalence. If you have interested in learning React client-side or server-side practices and code and all that kind of fun stuff and how to build full-stack CRUD applications, also check the description down below for a link to our community memberships. For $25 a month, you get access to our front-end course, our back-end/database course, as well as my standalone deep dive React course. and any future courses we code. I'm currently working on both a deep dive into databases as well as a deep dive into TypeScript. So let me know if you have interest. Check for a link in the description down below. But the front end, I'm going to be coding using React and React DOM. So remember, I'm building this for our students from our curriculum to use, but this is going to be just good information for anyone out there that's curious how to build this process themselves. Now, our students are taught and they know Bootstrap, but it is actually quite easy with ESBuild to configure either Bootstrap using Sass, CSS modules, CSS style sheets, CSS and JS solutions are simple to work with, and even Tailwind. If there's interest in that, let me know, and this video series could extend beyond the 2 or 3 that I have planned to talk about some various configurations with how cool and simple and fast ESBuild is to get this stuff up and running. I already built this particular project using Tailwind, and I'm already building a personal side project for a group of friends and I using it, and I'm a fan, and it inspired me enough to make this into a video series on our YouTube channel. So I'll be using Bootstrap, which means we'll be using Sass so I can customize it, but we'll install that in just a moment. These are the core dependencies for this whole thing to actually do its job. And you're wondering, Luke, where are ESBuild and all of its necessary things? That's going to be installed down here in our dev dependencies. I'll go ahead and install these. Now, I have become a new proponent in separating dependencies and new user of separating things into dependencies and dev dependencies. I used to just cram everything in dependencies object and call it a day, but these days I kind of like the organization. It makes me look like I put some more thought into it by separating them, but you technically don't need to. But this can help in large-scale production projects, keeping them separate, because things like Heroku, Vercel, all these things will install all dependencies, run whatever it needs to run, and for optimizing a production bundle, they will actually remove development dependencies and just keep the regular dependencies to try and save some overhead. So that could be something to keep in mind depending on your deployment strategy. Actually keeping things separated could be a big deal. But when I was learning, I didn't care, and the further I got into my coding journey, the more I cared about it. So we're going to be using TypeScript because that is what we teach in our course, and I do recommend that you use it for your projects, even if you don't really use strong static typing. TypeScript to Spectrum. If you just want to use it to help do some autocompletes and autofills and some additional typo support, it's awesome for that alone. Like I said, that would only make the build process a little bit more complicated, but really not that bad whatsoever. But otherwise, you can make the TypeScript rules so loose that it's basically just vanilla JavaScript with a couple extra beta JavaScript features available to you. So yeah, we're going to use TypeScript. I will also be installing our friend ESBuild. I mean, that's the point of this video. I might as well go ahead and install that. It has a strong community support of plugins that allow it to do additional configurations. In particular, I'll be using one plugin called, if I can learn to type, the ESBuild Sass plugin. I found that this one was pretty well kept up with. It had good documentation and things like that, and it was very easy to use and customize what I needed it to do. So this plugin will allow ESBuild to understand and parse, for example, Sass import statements into our React TSX code, and how to properly bundle and inject that into the head of our HTML during production bundling time. So we'll get around to that. So we'll need ESBuild to do its job. We'll also need the typings, obviously, for React and React DOM, as those will be important to have at our availability. Now I'll obviously install things in the next video like Express, cores, types for Express, types for Node, all that kind of fun stuff. I don't think we'll need the Node typings as of right now. I don't think we will. So yeah, we're going to start with this, and I'll always just come back here and install anything else I may need as we go through the video that I might have forgotten. I made a general lesson plan. This is my first time going through it, so we'll see how well this goes. All right, so everything is installed and good to go. I'm gonna go ahead and make 2 or 3 directories here to get started. I'm gonna choose to hide the configurations of ESBuild into a config folder. Now, again, you could just have one config MJS in the root of your project and make sure you just point to separate functions inside of that configuration file. But again, because I'm breaking this video into different parts, I'm going to break my configuration into different parts. And rather than pollute like the root of my project, I'm going to go ahead and cram them into a directory. I'm going to very obviously call ESBuild config. I'm also going to make a public folder. This is going to be housing our index HTML and eventually our static generated bundle from our ESBuild bundling process that will serve our React website, right? So eventually in production, this public folder will be the static folder and files that we send to the browser when requested upon. And then from there, we're also going to have a source folder that's going to be, well, all of our client and server side source code that will be compiled and bundled using ESBuild, as well as some files. So we're going to go ahead and make I should make a readme.md, but for this one, since I already have a readme written out for the template, I'll have linked down below. I'm not going to make a readme or a license or anything like that, but I'll make a git ignore for this so y'all can get some practice with that as well. And I'm going to write this by hand instead of writing out my, instead of using TS, or like npx tsc init or something like that. I'm going to write it up by hand just so I can talk about some of the properties I'm going to set here and what they are, and just move on from there. But again, you can customize it however you see fit if you are more experienced in TypeScript. But if you're not, don't worry about it. I'll explain and try and throw out some analogies of the properties I'm writing and why I'm writing them. And again, you could look into it and change them to your needs. Again, this is a more general monorepo build for people, but if you have experience, you can customize it however you see fit. And hopefully we'll spend more time on ESBuild and everything else in here. For every other file, I'll probably just make it through VS Code. So let's go ahead and open your code editors or your preferred IDEs. Yes, I know, error. And yeah, we got a solid looking project here ready to go. So let's actually code out what's going to be, let's say, our TS config. We'll start with this sucker right here. So I will go ahead and begin coding out what I think I'm going to need here. So making my notes to make sure I'm not going to forget something major. I don't think I will. We'll see. Right, so it's going to be a JSON object. So I'm going to go ahead and let me check the recording window to make sure I'm not like super zoomed out and we can read everything. Okay, cool. I should have double checked that before I started recording, but we are not, because we are hashtag professional here. So I'm going to set a series of compiler options that's going to help me build out this whole thing. It's just an object that's going to contain all of our settings on how TypeScript will process the code via ESBuild. ESBuild will end up using this TypeScript configuration file, right? So basically, it's just the settings or preferences menu of anything you've ever done before is what this object and all of its properties are going to do. So I want to make sure that I generate a source map in, at least in development or in things like that, because, well, it maps the output files back to the original TypeScript files. I was actually telling some students today in a webinar about what source maps are. Remember, we're going to be writing React TSX TypeScript stuff, right? So not only will we have the syntactic sugar of JSX inside of our JavaScript functions, we're going to also be using TypeScript and all of its features and all of its specifics as well. So we need to be able to not only take what we write, transpile, compile, bundle, and send it to something that the browser can actually read and understand, because the browser doesn't know TypeScript, it doesn't know TSX, it doesn't know all that stuff. So we got to translate it for browser usage. But if we get a runtime error, meaning some kind of error in the browser, map is not a function on undefined or something like that, then that error in the browser's runtime will point to like line 6000 of our JavaScript bundle. And we're going to be left scratching our heads going, well, where does that go back to in our original code? Because the browser has some crazy looking JavaScript file it's referencing, but how does that map back to my source code? And that's what a source map is, right? It's like a GPS tracker for the code. It remembers the original route the code took. So if we get an error in the browser, it can relatively quickly point back and go, oh, that happened in your card.tsx component file at line 63-ish. And then you have a good place to start debugging your code, which is what we're going to use a source map for. Next, we got to set a target property. I'm going to go crazy here and do ES 2022 with whatever features we need there. This you can customize to whatever your need is. I know most browsers have like a 90% or higher adoption rate of a lot of 22 features, which I found out from caniuse.com. But if your personal needs are for running in an older browser or mobile browser or something like that, you may have to adjust this. Basically, this sets the ECMAScript version that the code should be transpiled to, meaning what version of the code that I write should be transpiled to what version of JavaScript. And this is where you would set it if you're working with older browsers. Just check what they can accept, or just set the target even earlier than this, right? So it's kind of like translating a book from Old English to Modern English. The story is the same, but the language is different. That's all we're really looking at here. Next, we're going to set our module resolution type. And we're going to set it to probably use common.js. It specifies what module system we're going to be using, and it's like choosing the kind of train track that our train's going to run on. Different kinds of trains, module systems, can accommodate different types of tracks, which are code structures, right? So that's all we're really looking at here. I like to set a strict value of true. Strict true enables all strict type checking options, so I don't have to worry about a bunch of weird sub options. A lot of the times, I'm sticking with true here, but a lot of times I'll do false on this and just set the ones individually that I really care about. But setting a strict true here is just easy. It's just like turning on all the strictest like grammar checking features. If this was like a typo and grammar function of some kind, it'd be like turning on the most strict grammar checks in our code. But we kind of want, if we're using TypeScript, we might as well use all of those features. But if you don't want a strict true, set it to false and look up the individual properties that strict true sets, and then just toggle the ones you want personally on. But I'm gonna keep it simple for this video and do strict true, so I don't have to go talk about all those. We have a property called ESModule interop. This allows default imports from modules with no default export. I've talked about this in many videos. One of my least favorite things about Node is the modulating, in the sense that everyone kind of does something different. There's no set standard. So some do a default level export, some do not do a default level export, and that could be very annoying when you're trying to import and use various libraries, right? Especially if you have a personal pattern you like and the library doesn't use it, and all of a sudden one import statement looks different than the rest and it pisses you off. Been there, brother and sisters, let me tell you. But it's like a compatibility adapter, right? So like having a universal power plug that can fit into various outlets in various countries, we are basically saying, hey, this is our adapter for how that's going to be handled here. Next, we are going to throw in a skiplib check of true. Yeah, that's right. We want true on this one typically. Basically, this skips type checking for declaration files. That's basically saying we're going to skip pre-flight checks for experienced pilots who have already done them multiple times. And again, basically skipping node modules, declaration files, and things like that. We're going to skip all that garbo. We're going to say, now we got this, homie. Something I like to now add into my projects as well is this lovely, very aptly named force consistent casing in file names. It ensures case consistency in file names. Because I have students that work on Linux, Mac, and Windows, we go through various operating systems and setups that are case sensitive, case insensitive, and it's bitten us in the rear more than once. So this is something I start adding to my boilerplates for students because, well, I want them to be consistent and I don't want to have to deal with hours of debugging only to realize that their git commands didn't add and commit a file because they changed it from lowercase to uppercase. It wasn't recognized, it wasn't pushed to GitHub, and therefore during the production deployment process, it wasn't finding that specific file or fixing an import statement or a path or something like that. Let me tell you folks, it's very, very annoying. Yeesh. So we're also going to have a root directory property that's going to be our source directory because, well, that's going to be where the root directory of all of our input files are going to be found. It's like designating the main entrance of a starting point of our building. It's like the rotating double doors where we walk into our lobby, and we're going to have like elevators that go up and stairs that go down, and that's what we're going to be pointing to. So this is like setting up the entryway to our large building here that will have two parts: a server, which will be our basement in this example, and our client, which will be our nice rooms up top here. We're going to include a module resolution property as well, and we're going to switch it to node module resolution. This is going to be how modules are discovered, right? So the node strategy mimics how Node.js already finds modules, and we're going to stick to it and call it a day. Righto. Did I write an analogy for this? I'm trying to teach y'all what it's like. It's like choosing between different styles of map. Are we looking at a street-based Google View map? Are we looking at a topographical map? A heat map? What kind of map are we looking at? How are we going to discover modules? We're going to say we're going to do the way that Node likes to do it and just set it to Node in that particular case. Something else I've also begun including is resolve JSON modules, which I'm going to set to true because we never know when I might import a JSON file to use inside of my code somewhere for like an array of objects or something like that for, I don't know, like routes or something like that I've done before, or like if any kind of dummy data I want to include inside of here. So this basically allows the import of JSON files. It's like adding a Blu-ray feature to our DVD players. It now knows how to read and properly handle a new type of media, which in our case is JSON files. Then, outside of compiler options, you need to include something called an excludes. Funny, I'm going to include exclude. An array of potential things to exclude, which is going to specify which files or directories, which we already know it's probably going to be, that should be excluded from compiling, which is going to be our node modules directory. We're going to say ignore the crap out of that for compiling because we don't have to compile node modules. We're compiling our source client code here. So we're going to set up a VIP list for our guest party. And we're going to say, hey, node modules is not part of the party, so kick their ass out. That's what we're going to do right there. Yeah. So that's going to be our top level configuration for TypeScript. Again, you can modify this as you see fit. I just wanted to give you some common properties and some ideas behind what they are and what they're writing. We all tend to write TSC init and just allow it to auto-generate. We don't read those comments. So a lot of the times it's nice to kind of go over these properties, even if you know what they are, to get like additional definitions and analogies and ideas from behind what they do. Okay. So while I'm talking about TS configs, let's go ahead and finish this whole process out, because again, this is like the umbrella, the top level umbrella that's going to connect both our client and our server configurations. This is something I've also started doing more to make sure I receive the proper TS support, depending on whether I'm in the client side code or I'm in the server side code. So our source folder is actually going to split into two parts. Today, I'm going to be focusing on the client directory, where tomorrow I'll focus on, surprise, the server directory. I'll go ahead and write it out, even if it's empty, just so I don't have VS Code doing the one-line source client thing here, because I want to make sure y'all recognize it's two separate folders and nothing's nested here. So in the client folder, I'm going to include a separate TS config that will take these base level rules, extend them, and maybe add some additional customizations or whatever needs to happen. So in my client folder now, I'm going to go ahead and write a new TS config JSON that's going to say, hey, I wish to extend the root level, so up out of client, up out of source, and there is my umbrella JSON that I want to extend my rules from. That way I don't have to rewrite a lot of the same properties I already wrote in the original TS config. In this case, I'm going to set my compiler options, and just like before, as you can see, moving a little bit faster now, my exclude properties as the following. Or rather, we're going to actually include an include, because exclude is already including node modules there, so we're going to call this an include. And I'm going to actually include all files that are going to be ending in the extensions of that right there, which will be all TS files, as well as everything inside of here that also ends in TSX files. So we're going to include all these kinds of files in our compiler options here. I need to set a specific property here, right here, which is a JSX value, not of true, it's React, that's what it was. Yeah, that's what it was, of React, right? So this specifies that the JS factory function to use when targeting React JSX syntax. How do we handle JSX syntax? What factory we want to use to handle processing all this stuff? The React value indicates it should use the default React JSX transformation. So this is like choosing a specific art style for a comic book. While the story remains the same, the artistic representation can vary based on the chosen style, and we're just saying use React's default JSX transformation style, right? So yeah. Okay, other properties here, we need to specify, if we should specify a root and out directory. So I'll say our output directory will be up out of client, up out of source, and look for a public folder with a static folder. It will create that inside for us. Our bundle will head to a folder called static, and it will have a bundle.js that's outputted there. And I will say the root directory or input for this project, our root dir, is this directory, our source client directory. So that's what we got going on here. Again, out directory just sets where the compile files will output. This can technically be overridden by our ESBuild anyway, but it's a good idea that you make your TS config clear, because it would be not very clear if we, if we had this out directory incorrectly and then had ESBuild override it with its own configuration instead. So I want to be at least a little bit consistent here. And the root directory is, like I said, it's the entry point of input files, which happens to be this source client folder. And that's it. That's actually all we need inside of our client-side configuration, because again, most of the rules are set up in our parent tsconfig umbrella. While I'm here, I'll go ahead and include the following in index.tsx, the entry point for our entire application. It's going to be importing and using the React library from the React library import. I'll be doing the latest and greatest React features. So I'll be importing from React DOM/client, which is what you do for V17 and higher, I'm fairly certain. And I don't have my app yet, so I'm going to go ahead and just write this temporarily, and we're going to fix it because it's going to throw an error here for a minute. But that's fine right there. I also don't have my Bootstrap stuff ready, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to comment this out for now. I'm going to go ahead and write the following, and we're going to comment it out. So there's going to be in the client folder, I'm going to make a styles directory, inside of which I'll have a top-level app Sass file that I'll be importing and using with that ESBuild plugin here momentarily. But from there, I need to go ahead and do the new way of React DOM, which is a React DOM.create root. And I want this create root to create a root out of document.get element by ID, and I want a root div that's going to be finding the TypeScript error because of my type checking is telling me that what if this selects as null because it may not find that HTML element. So I'm going to do a cast and say, nope, you are going to be selecting this as an HTML element. It's going to exist. Do not worry about the null possibility. We're simply going to do as HTML element, and from there we can say root render our app when we get that far into this process. I'll comment that out for now. So yeah, there is our lovely index.tsx. Let's go ahead and, what is this fussing at me for? I think it's saying it can't, no inputs were found for the config file. So it's like, yeah, I don't see any inputs for this yet. So we'll get there in just a moment. So our app.tsx is going to be importing React. And let's do some use states from the React library. What am I doing? Oh yeah, curly braces around this. There we go. Oops. Yeah. That's going to be using in this particular file. We're going to say const app is a JavaScript function that returns any amount of JSX. We'll do a div, and we'll bump it from the top when we have Bootstrap enabled. We'll do an h1 of text center and text, I don't know, like info or warning. I don't care what color it is. We'll do secondary. I don't care. And it'll say hello world. And there we go. So once Bootstrap is enabled, we're going to very quickly know whether or not our class names are actually working here. We're going to do a default level export for our application. It's a good idea. We're going to go ahead and include an interface of props. At the moment, this component receives no props, but I like to go ahead and wire that up just to be prepared. But remember, with TypeScript, it shouldn't have any kind of output on our actual compiled and bundled code. Now for state, I don't use any yet, but I'll go ahead and prepare one because eventually I want to come back in here. We'll do this. And I want to eventually have this coming from an API request to our server that's going to be running in this project. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and just hard code it. And we'll come back in the future and replace it with a use effect that runs a fetch to our server to confirm the whole Monorepo project is working the way we expect. There's our app, which means in my index, I can now come comment this stuff in, which means that part is now set and happy to go. Okay. And then from there, I need to make a styles folder. Inside of that styles folder, I'm going to make that app.scss file right there. And what we need to do is code out our basic Bootstrap stuff. So ultimately, you need to have your Bootstrap import at the bottom of the file and any customizations that you wish to do at the top. We're going to leverage the syntax here of this tilde, saying look in the root and node modules directory to find this particular library. It has a Sass directory inside of that, and inside of that there should be a Sass file that we're going to be compiling into CSS in our JavaScript bundle that will get injected into the head of the HTML. Now, out of sheer curiosity to see if this works, this is a Bootstrap Sass property we can customize to set the body background color of the whole project. Another quick indication that yes, our Sass and customizations are being correctly compiled into CSS and injected into the head of the HTML. So again, there's big obvious test between our app.tsx and our Sass file to make sure it's all being connected and working correctly. So there we go. That's going to handle our body BG right there. Should be good to go. So yeah, that's our Sass, which means I can now fix this import here and call it a day. I don't know why this is still saying I have no input files here. That's interesting that I have that error. It's like I should have input files, homie. That should be fine. I do have a typo. I thought something was wrong. My bad, y'all. If you saw that and you called me on it and you paused the video and got in the comments, I apologize about that. Yeah, the includes array needs to be 2 separate files. That's why I had that error. It's because my pattern was incorrect and I didn't notice it until like I paused the recording. I looked at it for a second, realized what it was, and then unpaused it. So sorry at that little edit right there, that jump went between my index and my TS config. I was actually perplexed. I was like, well, I have input files now, so the error should be going away. I tried closing and reopening VS Code. It didn't fix the error, and then I realized that, oopsie, I made a typo right here. I like to leave my mistakes in because even though I've been doing this for years, I still make dumb little mistakes. And I like to humanize these things to make sure that you other devs out there and students watching this, it's okay to make mistakes. We all make them. We just get faster at figuring out what the hell we did wrong. So there you go. Quick little mess up on my pattern right there, but we got it fixed, and it's all honky-dory and ready to go now. Okay, so I think our client-side stuff is set and ready to go. I have no way to test it as of yet, but we are about to head over and begin talking about our ESBuild configuration. That's where the magic sauce is finally going to come into play here. Or no! Just kidding. I got to make my index.html in my public folder, otherwise this whole thing won't work. So in my index.html, we don't really need anything super fancy. I'm just going to go ahead and do my exclamation point enter emit shortcut, generate whatever basic document you want. Again, I'll call this TS React Express eventually, ESBuild, like that. We'll call it that. That's my meta char set, my viewport. I'm not going to set my meta name and theme color and things like that. I will include a no script tag here that says, yo, you need JavaScript to run this app. And eventually I need to have my root div ready to go, so my as HTML elements force casting isn't screwing with my code and being a liar. And I need to also include, eventually, when it is generated, my bundle.js, which we could call pizza.js. We can call this car/pizza.js. Names don't matter. But static bundle.js will indicate to other developers in our code that we have some static files that are going to be served with this website, particularly one called a bundle.js, which clearly indicates that we have transpiled, compiled, and bundled something in this process. So it's a good indicator to other devs what the hell is going on, which is, again, is a mark of good code, something that if I write meaningful names, other developers can come in here, understand what my intention was, and help me maintain it. A very key part we like to take into consideration when writing strong code. So I had that generated. The static folder should be written by the ESBuild config. We're going to see if that works or not here in just a minute. But yeah, now, I like how I spend, what is my time at? 31 minutes talking about random files and folders when the whole star of this entire series is ESBuild, and I haven't even done anything with it yet. So that is a top tier, Luke, top tier. What can I say? Now, these files, we don't actually matter what we call them because ultimately these JavaScript files are going to be running with Node. So we're going to run Node on these files to generate and run their configurations. All of this can be done as flags passed to our command line, but I'm not a fan of having huge flags in our command line. I'm much more of a fan of writing the following. If I want to be able to watch my client-side code, I want to have the following. I want to have some command that says node esbuild-config, which is the name of this folder. Inside of that, please look for some kind of file. I'm going to call mine client.dev.mjs. That's what I want my script to look like. I don't want it to be all crazy and gnarly with like 10 different flags happening on it and things like that. Some people and individuals like that. If you like that, go for it. It's fine. But I'm going to take all those additional flags and leverage the JavaScript API. Again, something that in their documentation, I saw a bit of a dearth in explanation for newbies. Again, that's what I'm trying to do this for. It kind of assumes you already know how these bundlers and their scripts work fairly decently. So again, if you don't know, this is what you would do. You would write a JavaScript file, you would run Node on that JavaScript file, and the contents within that will dictate how ESBuild builds it. But you can translate everything I write in there into flags on this instead. But I'm not going to choose to take that method here. So let's go and leverage some JavaScript, y'all. So like I mentioned with MJS extensions, I am indeed very heavily leveraging, like I said, the import and top-level await syntax of what this affords me. That's why we need the newer versions of Node installed on our machines. Our module JavaScript, which allows me to use some of these features, such as import *as ESBuild from ESBuild. Their documentation says to write that as an import statement. I'll be using the Sass plugin from ESBuild SaaS plugin so I can have Bootstrap enabled. And there's actually going to be another installation I'll be doing here in just a minute, but I want to see if it's fixed yet or not, because there's an error over the weekend I encountered that had a issue opened on it, and I'm curious if a newer version of Bootstrap has fixed it yet or not. I didn't see what version it was, and I also don't know what version caused the error. We're on 5.3.1. We'll see if there's an error still. Okay, or actually it's a warning, not an error. So in order to, what we're going to be doing here, we need to set up where our client configuration is going to find all of the client-side code, what rules to follow, how to bundle it, is it going to minify it, generating a source map, where it's going to output the file, any plugins, any environment variables we wish to define. Now, technically, you're wondering, Luke, there are no environment variables on websites. I know that. We can't hide or hide any kind of code that runs in the browser. Can't do that, right? If someone's clever enough, they will find anything we try and hide if it runs in the browser. But I do need to run a certain line of code in development, but not in production. So I'm going to leverage a property called define that will allow me to define a symbol or value that I wish to use in my client-side code. Again, in a development environment, but not in a production environment. So then we need to tell ESBuild we want to watch files for changes. In development, if I change something in my source client folder, that means I want it to recompile and rebundle all of my juicy TSX code and rebundle it, and then I want the browser to I can refresh, or I can find some code to actively refresh the browser whenever that happens. So how do we do that? Let's keep on going. We're going to find out. So I'm going to make a variable because I'm going to need to reference this variable in a couple different spots in my code potentially. So I'm going to go ahead and make it at a global scope. And I'm going to not assign it yet because we're going to be assigning it here in just a minute. But I'm going to go ahead and wire up a try catch. I'll be using some top level async or just await code without having to use the async syntax in this particular case. And I want to make sure if something happens in this process, I want to catch an error, maybe log what the error is with a fancy console.error. That's going to say an error occurred. That's how you spell it, right? 2 C's, 2 R's. Yeah, that seems right. And then I'll simply just display whatever that error happens to be. So there we go. Nothing to it here, folks. Nice and simple error handling. And I want a graceful exit, so I'm going to say, nope, stop it. Process dot exit. Why is process dot exit not happy with me here? They should be able to do a process dot exit 1 without any kind of issue. Just stop the whole process entirely if an error occurred during this bundling, compiling, and watching and serving process, just because, well, the whole thing's screwed. And we are running Node on this, so this should be able to understand that. And I'm wondering if that doesn't know what it is because I don't have the types for Node installed. So let's go ahead and install the types for nodes, since technically that would be a node process and it needs to know what that is. So I don't know if it'll recognize without me having to close and reopen it here. There we go. That's why I was missing. That's why I didn't autocomplete, folks. I did need to install that because, yeah, this is a node process and this is a node script that's going to be running this file as we saw, right? npm run dev just runs node on this file. We're using process exit 1 to gracefully stop everything on error, and we need the typings for node installed so our TypeScript IntelliSense knows what the heck's going on. That's why. Okay, I knew something was wrong. All right. So, unlike ESBuild.build, I'll be using a particular syntax called ESBuild.context. Context is a function that takes an object as argument and it returns our context to us. So I'm going to take my context variable and assign the output of the context. Why am I doing this? This is how you can both watch and serve from the context that we're about to build. So that's why we're choosing context over build, because it allows us some other key features. And again, watch and serve together is what allows us to have quote unquote, massive quote unquote, hot reloading in our process here. So in this ESBuild context, I need to define my entry points for this entire thing. Again, it's an array that'll specify the entry points of the application. Entry points are the root files from where the bundler starts its work. So again, the front door of our building, the same way we had root dir inside of our TS config, I need an array of entry points. In our case here, it's going to be the source client. Index.tsx is the entry point for the whole React application and everything from there. Bundle true. So bundle is a boolean to indicate whether the file should be bundled together or not. Imagine we have a lot of separate Lego pieces. Setting bundle to true is like assembling all those pieces into one unified structure. Eventually we'll talk about code splitting and things like that, but for now I want it to bundle every file that the index references, again, our entire app, into one bundled JavaScript file that will then output us a single static file in my public folder. So we're going to do a bundle of true. Then for a property called minify, we're going to set that to false for now, because in development, I don't care about it minifying. In production, I would. But minifying, again, if it should be minified, which removes all unnecessary characters and white space without changing the function of the code to reduce its size. Remember, we like verticality and indentation in our code. A computer don't care about that stuff. So if we say minify false, it won't minify it because we don't really care. So I don't know. We don't need that in development, but in production, we would want to minify our code. I want that tooltip to stop popping up right over where I'm trying to type. Source map. We're also going to say a source map of true in this case. And I think some of these properties seem redundant. There's probably a way I can tell it to read the TS config for a couple of these, but for now, we're going to just keep it to exactly what I have working. And if I have to have a follow-up video that optimizes this further, or some YouTube comments telling me how I should do it instead, then that's always nice. That's why I like teaching and making these videos. So, out file, something we need here. Where is this thing going to be outputted to? And I'm going to say, look in the root of the project for a public folder, make a static folder, and make a bundle.js file inside of that out file. And that's where that static bundle.js and our index.html will be referencing the compiled and bundled code when this thing actually runs. On top of that, I need to include a plugin array. So this is where you can customize the rules that the ESBuild context can follow. In our case, it needs to be a call to the Sass plugin like that, and there we go. I'm going to pass in an object configuration of options here to Sass plugin. I'm going to say the type needs to be of type style. This is what a lot of modern frameworks and bundlers end up doing, in the sense that rather than outputting a static folder with a static folder with CSS files, what it's going to be doing is it's going to bundle the Sass compiled to CSS bootstrap, and what it's going to do is it's going to dynamically inject the bootstrap into a style tag in the head of our HTML. When the bundle loads. So the bundle is going to be responsible for injecting this style tag into the head of our HTML with all the juicy bootstrap class name selectors, values, and styles and things like that. That's just what a lot of these modern frameworks do, and we're going to mimic that style by passing this particular type to our Sass plugin. We're going to come back to this later, depending or not whether or not we get some warnings about deprecation and blah, 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 blah. We'll see. But for now, this should be totally fine. Yes. Now from there, I'll add the define property later, but for now, I wish to come down yonder and write await CT. Again, this top level await is nice. CTX.watch. So CTX watch, right? Yes, I'm well, I got any's on here. But yeah, so CTX watch. This is telling the context of our ESBuild process to watch our files for changes, which means every time I save something that's inside of our entry point, our whole application, it should be watching those files for changes, automatically recompile and rebundle and re-output a new static bundle.js, and that is when we can refresh our browser to see if it's working or not. Speaking of which, we need a way of serving these files to our index.html, which honestly, I think I could just open this directly and then talk about how to start hot reloading it. So out of sheer curiosity, this theoretically should be enough to work. So I could say client bundling or something like that as a console log, just to have something being outputted here. Client bundled and watching or something like that as my output. But that should be enough to get up and running, and I'll include hot reloading in massive air quotes here in just a minute in this long ass video. But yeah, welcome to bundling. It's more complicated than it feels like it needs to be, but that's pretty good. So let's go ahead and see what happens if I run a npm run dev command, y'all. CTX watch is not a function. All right, well that's awesome. So clearly I forgot something, everybody. What did I forget? I know what I forgot. This is an asynchronous process. That is the whole reason I have this try catch and the MJS points there. So basically, because of the synchronous code running here, it would attempt to, this would be a promise I wasn't waiting to finish, which means this would then attempt to wait, and then context was just an empty variable, which is not a promise that has a function called watch on it. So I forgot that await keyword right there, and the whole thing came crumbling down. Get in the comments, hashtag professional. Consummate professional every single time. Yeah, so it still has this this deprecation warning that comes from a Sass plugin saying, hey, your version of Bootstrap is using some kind of deprecating absolute function, ABS absolute function, resolved with some kind of percentage unit. Shouldn't be done that way anymore. Bootstrap just does it this way in its own source code, and our Sass plugin is saying you shouldn't do it this way anymore because it's becoming deprecated. This is a warning that shouldn't have any output on our code, but we're gonna go find out. It shouldn't. It should not have a problem with it, but we can find a way to silence this until the error is fixed, or downgrade to a version of Bootstrap that doesn't have this error. I forget what version that our other boilerplate uses that doesn't have the problem, but yeah, something I expected to see here. But honestly, we shouldn't have the bundle.js is ready to go along with the source map right there as well, which means I should be able to open this in my default browser. It looks terrible, but yeah, there you go. There is my lovely looking React code bundled up. Clearly, Bootstrap is bundled with it as well. Sorry, it's burning everybody's eye sockets out on the recording window here, but we got it, folks. But how do I have it automatically refresh? Well, the refresh isn't there yet, but check this out. We're going to go to our client app TSX, and we're going to write a paragraph of lorem ipsum text by doing paragraph lorem inside of it for some IntelliSense or Emmet shortcuts. That should have triggered it to recompile, recompile, rebundle, which means if I refresh the page manually, we do see that lorem ipsum appear. Now, if I wanted this to be automatically refreshing, how do we set that up? Well, the only way that's going to be happening is if we set up a server that will serve this output and some kind of line of code from ESBuild's documentation is how I learned this, to not only watch the files for changes, but automatically serve them and automatically refresh the website when that happens. So we're going to do that with the following code. We are going to change this to say watching client. I'm going to move that up next to that await. And the next line of code we're going to have is a destructure of another await. I can't forget ctx.serve. There's the autocomplete. Every time my autocomplete's not working, again, why I like TypeScript, it should tell me right away that I have a problem in my code. So ctx.serve will start a small server that will serve our website to us, which will allow us to do the auto refreshing on any saved changes. I will give it a serve directory. Where is it serving from? Look in the root of the project for a folder called public. And again, we'll eventually have front-end routing. So we're going to have a fallback. A fallback is for what happens if we have a single page application that has client-side routing involved with it. This is going to be my fallback. So if I type in my cool website /poopoo.poop if that's a 404 route, instead of the server saying, I don't know what that route is, I tell it to fall back to the index HTML and let some React Router DOM client-side routing 404 air handle it for me and not make it a server-side 404, but a client-side 404. I'll go ahead and console log hot refresh at http:// like that. Where are these two interpolated values going to come from? This will return to us a host and a port that will allow me to simply say, this should be 000 for localhost, and this should be port for port. I think it defaults to 8004. I can't remember 100%. But this alone will auto-serve the newly bundled files that we are watching for changes. It will save, rebundle, and the server will resend the new bundle and new static files to the browser, but that doesn't trigger an automatic refresh yet. I have to include the following in my source code somewhere. I need to have one line of code. Again, I learned this from the newest API documentation of ESBuild. I can say, hey, I need a new type of event that's going to be happening in the browser here. The type of event that's going to happen is called an ESBuild event. This is going to be generated from, obviously, ESBuild. It will trigger this event in the browser. And when this event happens, I want to add a listener to it. The type will be a change listener. So when ESBuild outputs a change event from this event source, I want the following code to run. This is why I had hot reload in massive, massive quotes. I want it to do a full location reload. So this is my hot reloading that's available on the browser here. So with all of that combined and this ESBuild configuration, let's stop and restart this sucker. Oh yeah, my administrator Windows alert is telling me, are you sure you want this thing running like a port and server? Like, are you sure you want running a server? Just allow access if you need to do that. So hot refresh at localhost :8000. Let's head on over there. We're going to say local hosts 8000. That's my lovely React site, like we saw from before. That's what I'm talking about. The fail to load errors for the favicon, I don't care about that. Let's have it refresh. So let's see if this works or not. Again, no tricks up my sleeve. I'm just going to go save a file in my React code and see if it works. We're going to go to app. I'm going to nuke this line 12. I'm going to hit delete. I have my autosave on, but I'm going to tab back to my browser as fast as I can so we can see if it works or not. I'm going to keep my hands off the keyboard. So delete browser, hands off. And there you go. It hot reloaded the browser. So now every time I change something in my React application anywhere at all, it will recompile, rebundle because it's watching for changes. The server will then reserve the new bundle, and that new event we're listening to should refresh the browser for us. So I think this video is long enough. It's almost an hour for setting up one ESBuild configuration for a client-side React application. In the next video, I will talk about how to shut up these warnings so they go away and you're out of your purview. But again, they are there. How to production versus development, because again, this line of code shouldn't exist in production because we're not going to be changing anything in production. And then in the next video, I'll also set up the server side, which will be a lot faster since it's going to be a lot of the same properties. Server side configuration, we're going to fetch that data and display it, and then talk about some additional little production optimizations, and that'll be it. That'll be how to build your own little template with ESBuild. It's so much faster and so much easier than Webpack. If you look at a Webpack config that has to do all this, compare it to this and how simple and clean and easy it is. I'm a huge fan of ESBuild. It's already won me over. I built projects with Vite, which is where I learned about it. Vite is another React building way of building React apps, and it uses ESBuild in the background, and it is lightning fast. So go check out Vite, build your own here, and learn as much as you can, and long live ESBuild. Let's hope they don't do some stupid API changes that break everything I've taught here within a couple months. Thanks, React Writer Dom. See you later, guys.